I bet you've had someone tell you that you should learn a new language the same way you learned your first language, through absorption and never by formal grammatical instruction, because kids are just so much better at learning languages than adults are, and they never needed formal instruction. Well, I don't know about you, but I wasn't having fluent English conversations until I was at least 4 years old. And I personally know tons of people who have become fluent in second languages much, much faster than that, myself included. So today, I want to dig into this question a little bit more to examine just how fast it's possible to learn a language when we stretch the boundaries of language education techniques. I'm Andrew with Brainscape, an adaptive study app that is optimizing how we learn foreign languages through an obsessive focus on spaced repetition. We've seen just about every language learning technique that you can imagine, from virtual reality to apps to the total immersion boot camp classes that CIA agents have to take. We've read all the scientific studies so you don't have to. And we've boiled it all down to a simple formula that will help you estimate how long it will likely take you to become proficient in your languages based on your unique circumstances. But first, a quick definition of what we mean by proficient. We're going to assume that you're shooting for what the Foreign Service Institute would call level 3 working proficiency, having enough structural accuracy and vocabulary to participate effectively in most formal and informal conversations on practical, social, and professional topics. Based on this definition, we can begin constructing our formula. We start with the baseline estimate that it will take you about 1,000 hours of study to gain working proficiency. Now, that's assuming you're working toward a language that has roughly the same written characters as ours, English. So maybe Spanish or French or Swedish or Romanian. Now, if the language has totally different characters, then double it. So if I'm thinking about learning Mandarin, I've already increased my baseline to at least 2,000 hours of study to begin with. Now, finally, I'm going to inflate the estimate by what proportion of my typical instruction hours that I think might actually be wasted because I'm not really pushing myself to the brink of my language learning skills for that whole time. For example, if I know that in my typical Mandarin class in college, I spend about half my time just waiting for the slow kids to catch up to the instructor or hearing about the next scheduled exam, then I'm going to double my estimate to 4,000 hours of Chinese in order to become proficient. So how much is 4,000 hours? Well, if you add up all the typical amount of class time and homework in 2 average college semesters, with say an hour of class and an hour of homework every day, that's only about 200 to 400 hours in an entire year. So no wonder you don't find too many Americans speaking proficient Mandarin.
还好吧。
Because it would take over 10 years of classes in our current system for us to get there. But don't freak out yet, because not only are there much better tools than traditional impersonalized classes, but these time estimates also aren't so bad for languages that are closer to our own. For example, French uses pretty much the same alphabet as English, so I wouldn't have to inflate that 1,000 hours estimate right off the bat. In fact, if I'm really optimizing how efficiently I'm studying, using most of my time in Brainscape to drill myself on vocab and verb conjugations and comprehension and pronunciation and sentence building in the most effective way possible using the magic of spaced repetition, then I can actually deflate my estimate to about half, only 500 hours of total studying to get proficient, or even less than that if I've already had some exposure to French in my life. Now, imagine that I actually moved to France for a while, so instead of just taking a college class for an hour a day and doing my homework and checking the boxes, I get 5 hours a day of solid, deliberate exposure, if you count all my time spent socializing and reading and watching TV and continuing to study in Brainscape as my main knowledge anchor. So if dividing that 500 hours estimate by 5 hours of efficient French exposure per day, you get that it takes about 100 days to become proficient in a language, or barely just 3 months if you're fully immersed and using the most optimal techniques. This sounds almost too short to be possible, but I can personally tell you that it is possible from experience, since I actually did this my very self. In 2006, I left my job as an economist in Washington, D.C. I moved to Martinique by myself with the sole mission of getting a job, making friends, and teaching myself French from scratch as a way to sort of test some language learning techniques that I'd thought up while studying Spanish back in school. In the process, I actually developed the first version of Brainscape as a program that I wrote in Microsoft Excel to quiz myself on French phrases and verb conjugations in a much more efficient space repetition algorithm that felt right for me. Et depuis seulement 3 mois, je pouvais parler le français presque couramment. And so many people started asking me for my methods that I decided to go back to grad school, get my master's in education technology and cognitive science, and start building the team and tools that have since developed Brainscape into the world's most effective and scientifically proven foreign language study platform. Bottom line, spaced repetition is popular for a reason, and combined with the right study tools, the right commitment, and many hours a day of practice, you can become proficient in a new foreign language in a matter of months. So if you are still committed to learning a language after tailoring these estimates for you, just make sure you allocate enough consistent and efficient study time spread out over as long as it takes for you to hit that many hours of required practice, and I have no doubt that you'll be able to rise to your challenge.